Hi, I'm Caroline Leavitt. I'm the co-founder of Mighty Blaze, which began the day the pandemic did when everybody's tours were canceled, including mine. And I banded together with Jenna Blum because we were having none of that. We just thought, we have to open the doors and get people connected. And we're now actually going on our fourth year. So Mighty Blaze is a toddler. And thank you all so much for supporting us. I know I always say that today is special, but today is absolutely really special because we have Anna Quindlen here with her book After Annie, which is, I just told Anna that to me, the highest compliment about a book is the book broke me in the best way. This book broke me in the best way. It's completely and totally, absolutely amazing. I want to tell everybody, we want you to go out and we want you to buy this book and buy all of Anna's books. I put a link in for bookshop.org to make it easy for you. It'll tell you where your favorite or best indie bookstore is, or maybe you have one already. Buy indie. Please buy indie. Also, if you have any questions, pop them in the chat and I'll get them to Anna, I promise. So, here's my introduction. Anna Quindlen is a novelist and journalist whose work has appeared on fiction, nonfiction, and self-help bestseller lists. She's the author of fabulous novels, Object Lessons, One True Thing, Black and Blue, Blessings, Rise and Shine, Every Last One, Still Life with Breadcrumbs, and Miller's Valley. Her memoir, Lots of Candles, Plenty of Cake, published in 2012, was a #1 New York Times bestseller. Her book, A Short Guide to a Happy Life, has sold more than 1 million copies, and I bought a few copies to give to my nieces and nephews when they graduated college. While a columnist at the New York Times, she won the Pulitzer Prize and published 2 collections, Living Out Loud and Thinking Out Loud. Her Newsweek columns were collected in Loud and Clear. So I want to talk a little bit about her book, and then I promise I'm going to let Anna speak. After Annie is a book about lives after a death. It's full of hope. You've never read a book that is more hopeful or more beautiful. It's about this woman, Annie Brown. She dies very suddenly, and everything, of course, changes. Yes, her husband, Bill, falls apart. Her oldest daughter, Allie, has to grow up really fast. And her best friend, Anne Marie, whose addiction was held in check by Annie's love and presence, has to grapple with being alone. But the thing that strikes me so much about this gorgeous book is that it's drenched in love and also with hope. It's really about how the people we love, I think they lodge inside of us and they continue to make us bigger and better. So I'm not the only one raving about this book. The New York Times said the very best thing about this book might be the way Quindlen, an anthropologist of domesticity, can put that on a t-shirt, catalogs the sparklingly random moments that make up human experience. I have another quote that I put in the chat. And of course, Publishers Weekly raves. Another acute portrait of family life from a virtuoso of the form. I am so thrilled to have Anna Quindlen here. I heard her speak at Zibby's, and I want to tell everybody out here that, some writers perform. Anna is the real deal. She's the most remarkably real human. Thank you for being here, Anna.
It's really my pleasure. It's so good to see you again, albeit on screen.
Okay, so I have a lot of questions. Okay, the first question is, sometimes in this novel, characters remark that Annie is nowhere to be found, and they mourn that. But just as painful and wonderful, she becomes everywhere. She's in their thoughts. She's in a teacup on the stove. So I wanted to ask you, who are we without the person we loved and depended on? Because I think that's the question that the book asks. Who do you think we are without the person we loved and depended on when they are wrong?
Well, I think the only thing that gets us through is that on the one hand, we're clearly without them. I mean, Bill Brown opens the fridge and discovers there is no milk because
Right.
Annie was the architect of their domestic life.
Right.
Allie has nobody to guide her. Anne Marie, is thrashing about looking for this friend of hers. And, at one level, she's gone. I think the whole
Uh-huh.
point of this novel is that she's very much there, that
Yes.
she's there in all their hearts and all their minds. And I think the only way we get through loss is to begin to understand that the only way a person really dies, a person we've loved, is when all the people that they loved and took care of die. That
That's
as
right.
long as we're around, they're still around in some sense. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day because I was in San Diego in La Jolla, and there's a beautiful little church called Mary, I think it's Mary Star of the Sea. And I went in, my mother died 52 years ago, and I went in and and lit a candle for her because she's still alive
That's right.
inside of me. And that's what this book is about. It's about the fact that if people are really beloved, good people never die because their influence, their legend, if you will, continues on and on.
I think there was this remarkable book written years ago called A Brief History of the Dead. I think it was by Kevin Brockmeyer. And it was about a land where dead people lived, but they only lived there if they were remembered by somebody who was living. And when those living people forgot them, they would fade a little bit. So it's an incredible thing to think about. And I think it's true. I think that like nothing is ever really lost. I wanted to talk about how the book is structured because it's not just through a year, it's through the seasons. And again, there's little deliberate things about each season and how all these characters change through the seasons and how they gradually start to come out, much like buds come out in the spring. Did you always know that it was going to be that way, or did that just sort of happen for you, or was it vaguely in your mind?
I knew that I was going to cover the first year after Annie's death, but it didn't occur to me until I was pretty far into it that seasonally it broke down. And of course, that's kind of the way all of our lives are. I mean, we have a certain way of living and being and thinking about ourselves in summer and in fall,
That's right.
and especially in winter when Christmas comes around, and in spring when things start to come back again. I mean, I always think about the fact that if you plant daffodil bulbs and you die, the daffodil bulbs still come back up again.
That's right.
And there's something
Right.
so powerful about that, you know? And so eventually it really ordered itself in those seasons in that way.
Yeah, it does. I wanted to ask you, without giving anything away, what I adored so much was the end of this book and the end of the book and how nothing was tied up neatly. There were surprises that felt inevitable. Did it surprise you, or did you know where it was going all the time?
There were a couple of things that kind of came as a surprise to me. I'm not sure I quite understood until we were about halfway through that they might move, that they might find another house. But of course, you know, that kind of move, particularly under these circumstances, is kind of a metaphor for everything that's gone before. I think I surprised myself a little bit with what happened to Anne Marie. So I sort of knew the general shape of it, but the fine points came upon me gradually.
Did you cry while you were writing this?
Well, the weirdest thing about this. So I wrote the first draft, and I understood intellectually that the book was moving,
It's
but
incredibly moving.
I didn't really feel it. I was flying at 30,000 feet, and I think maybe in retrospect, because it was so curious when I figured it out, that's what I needed to get it down. Then when I sat down to do the revisions, I kept crying so hard that I had to stop working because I couldn't see the keyboard. I couldn't see the screen. I thought, what did you do emotionally here, Anna? Did you hold everything in abeyance until you had gotten it down? Because once I was revisiting it, boy, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
I miss them. I genuinely feel pain because I miss the characters because they were so real on the page. And I keep thinking, are they all right? I mean, are the characters?
But don't, that's such a thrilling feeling. Look, I mean,
Of course,
going out on book tour can be really exhausting, but the best part of it is that readers tell you what you've done.
That's right.
Readers tell you what you've done. And I remember after Black and Blue was published, the ending of Black and Blue is this estrangement. Readers coming to me and saying, I just need to know whether Fran finds Robert again. And I had to keep saying everything that I know is on the page and in the book. But deep inside, I kept thinking, yes. And with these characters, I think they'll all be okay. I'm sure Anne Marie will be okay, except that she's never going to have another friend like this.
Right.
She's going to have lots of friends, but she and Annie started when they were 6 years old. She'll never have another friend with that kind of history. I think Allie will be okay, but look, someone told me years ago, which was so unhelpful, that there's an old proverb that says, no girl becomes a woman until her mother dies.
Oh, that's
Allie becomes a woman in one night.
Yeah.
She has dinner as one person, and the next morning she wakes up as a completely different person. There's a wonderful, wonderful nonfiction book, which I recommend to everyone who comes up to my signing table and says, your work speaks to me because my mother died when I was X years old. It's called Motherless Daughters by Hope Edelman.
I know that book. Yes.
And it's really a psychological study of what happens to your character when this happens to you. And it will happen to Allie. She will become really strong and really driven to try to fill the hole in her heart. And maybe Bill will remarry. I
didn't know whether he would or not. I kind of felt like it's too soon for now, but maybe in a few years.
He's really young.
Yeah.
He's
young too.
I mean, when my father became a widower, people would say to me, "Oh, well, is he dating?" I'd say he's 40 years old.
That's really young.
Yeah,
That's young. He has time. He has time to do that.
Exactly.
You have this wonderful story about how you became a writer, and I would love it if you would tell us that. And also for people out there, pop your questions in the chat.
About Mother Mary Ephraim.
Yes.
Well, I mean, I started to think about wanting to be a writer because when I was a little girl growing up in a beautiful suburb, having a wonderful childhood in which none of the mothers worked outside the home, I looked around and thought, there's no room in this life for me. I mean, I was at 8 the person I am today, and that was a bad mix. And so I read voraciously, and that made me think that there was a bigger life out there, that there was hope for me. And I read voraciously, and I wrote all the time. And in 8th grade, when I handed in a composition to Mother Mary Ephraim, who was really, really smart and really unrelenting and took no prisoners, she looked up at me over her half glasses and said, "Miss Quindlen, you are a writer." And I was not about to argue with Mother Mary Ephraim about anything. And that really stuck with me. And I always say, there's no question about it. I am a writer because of teachers. I am a writer because of teachers who over and over again said, you are good at this and you should keep up with it. And I say that all the time because I don't ever want anyone to overlook how powerful teachers are and how
That's right.
it's probably the single most important job in our society.
I think so too. I think so too. Um, you have these fabulous quotes that I've heard you say. You said about writing, you will have to pretend that you know how to do what we do when people ask you about writing. And then you said inspiration comes during work, not before. And when I heard that, I thought, oh my God, that's exactly right. Can you talk about that?
Yes, yes, but as a lifelong reporter, I have to give credit where credit's due.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
The first part about pretending you know how we do what we do is from Edgar Doctorow,
Oh, excuse me.
the
Okay.
brilliant writer of Ragtime and the Book of Daniel. And the second is from Madeleine L'Anglais, who wrote one of
Oh,
my
okay.
favorite books, A Wrinkle in Time. Every once in a while, somebody gives me credit for a quote that I didn't that I quoted someone else saying, and because of my life as a journalist, I so I have to give credit for that. But I mean, I'm sure you agree. What we do when we write fiction is sort of mysterious.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, where does this come from? And of course, lots of readers assume that where it comes from is your actual life.
Right.
So
Right.
at various times, people have suggested that I'm Mimi Miller of Miller's Valley, or Ellen Golden of One True Thing, or Megan Fitzgerald, all these characters that have nothing in common with one another, but are all supposed to be me, none of whom are me, all of whom are draw on all the experiences I've ever had, all the people I've ever met, but pulling it all together into these people who you live among
Uh-huh.
for the time that you're working on the novel, and who, if you're doing it right, as you know, come to seem realer to
Real.
you than real people.
Yeah.
Um, it's kind of a mystery, and I hate to say that because it's hard. A mystery makes it somehow sound easy, and
Right.
I want people to understand that it is and can be really hard work.
Right. It is not a magical thing. I think when
Yes.
they say that, people think, oh, you're so lucky you get to sit at home and write. It must be wonderful. And there are many days when it's not wonderful.
Many days.
Many days. Okay. When you were speaking at Zibby Owens, you said you no longer read your reviews, and you gave this impossibly wonderful advice to a lot of new writers out there, where you said it's important to remember that any review is just one person's opinion. And I thought that is so generous to say and so fabulous, because every writer tends to think, well, here's a review, and they said, I should be taken out with the trash. Therefore, I should be taken out with the trash. Or even when they say, oh, you're the next Fitzgerald, does that really mean that you are? I mean, I just thought that was an incredibly smart and generous thing to say to all the writers there.
But I was thinking about it again this morning because I read two different reviews of the opening of a new Broadway musical, like Water for Elephants, based on the
Right,
novel.
right.
Okay. One of the reviews completely destroys the show.
Oh,
Okay. Everything there. I don't think there's a positive remark in it. The other review says it's fabulous, wonderful. I don't think there's a negative remark in it. And it made me think, this is what happens,
right.
that it really is just one person's opinion. And the other thing is, it might be one person's opinion who's not in your wheelhouse. I'll
Right.
give you
That's
I'll give
right.
you an example.
Right.
So my eldest child, my elder son, is extremely well read, like me, an English major.
Mhm.
I I sort of divide novels into what I think of as cool novels and warm novels. Okay. Quinn totally gravitates towards the cool. He Every time we have a conversation about Moby Dick, it ends poorly. Quinn thinks Moby Dick is the novel. I think it's about 100 pages too long.
Yeah, I think I'm with you.
He loves Joseph Conrad. I've never been able to make that connection. I love Edith Wharton.
Oh yeah.
He thinks Lily Bart is a simp. Okay, so if Quinn was assigned to review the Age of Innocence or the
Oh,
House of Mirth, and I was assigned to review Conrad, it would go terribly. And a lot of times, I'll see the I shouldn't wail on book editors because God knows, book review editors, because I love them, but sometimes the assigning,
right. It's off.
as soon as I see the byline on the review, I think, oh, this can only end in tears. So not reading mine has been invaluable.
That's very bad, but I think it's important for people to know that, and to realize that a lot of it does have to do with the reviewer. You're not going to give a book about, say, someone who loses a child to somebody who has just lost a child. That might not be a wise decision. You also spoke, I want to talk about being edited and how a lot of writers don't like it. I want to know, like, what's your feeling about being edited? What makes a good editor for you, and what does not? And how should people approach being edited?
So in 1987, I think it was, nobody was really interested in my first novel. What they were interested in was a collection of my Life in the 30s columns, which had gotten a certain amount of traction in the New York Times.
We all love that.
Thanks. But my agent, who is still my agent and one of my close friends, went out there with this package. We got 2 books from Anna Quindlen, the columns, and this first novel that she's working on called Object Lessons. So in an auction, which made me feel like an armoire, Kate Medina of Random House won me after I'd met with 4 editors and told each one of them that what I really wanted was someone who would edit me so that my work would be better.
Right.
And honestly, in theory, I really meant that. In practice, I hate every minute of it. Kate has now edited all 21 of my books, and the routine is always the same. She edits on paper. So I get back this big envelope from her, and it's the manuscript on which she's edited in pencil. And then it's kind of this long disquisition. It always begins with a paragraph about how much she loves the book and what she loves about the book. I skip right over that.
Okay.
I'm not. And then she breaks down and says, I think there's too much backstory at the end of the first chapter, and it could easily go to, and I only know this after about a week, because when the FedEx package comes, I put it on a chair in my office, and then I try not to look at it, and I don't open it for about a week. And then after I open it, I don't read it. So there's 2 weeks during which I'm a big honking baby. And then I sit down and read it and conclude that she's never understood me. She's never understood my work.
Right.
And then I do about 60 to 70% of what she suggested. And I keep in mind the fact. So in One True Thing, which is a novel about a woman,
Right.
in a professional woman coming home from New York City to take care of her mother in the suburbs, there's this whole section in the middle where they create what they call the Golden Girls Cook and Book Club, which is each of their fortes. Ellen picks 3 books that they're going to read together, and her mother teaches Ellen to cook, because Ellen thinks of her mother as anti-intellectual, and her
Right.
mother knows that Ellen has considered cooking a tool of the patriarchy, as I once did. And they do this together. And it's a lot of the middle section of the novel. It was not there in the first draft. None of it was there in the first draft, because Kate said to me, I need to see them doing something together. And I said, the whole point of this novel is that there's no point of connection between the 2 of them, that one of them is all about the outside world and work, and one of them's all about home and family, and therefore they're a metaphor for the second wave feminism and yada yada yada. And Kate said, I need to see them doing something together. So I came up with this, which now seems like such an inevitable part of the novel. And every time I get shirty about Kate editing me, I think, remember the Golden Girls Cook and Book Club.
That's hilarious. We have a really great question from Ellen. Hi, Ellen. Ellen Commissar. In what ways are book editors better or worse than the editors you dealt with at the New York Times? It's an interesting question.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I actually had really good editors most of the time at the New York Times. I know reporters really love to bitch and moan about editors, and I did my share of that. But a lot of first of all, there were a lot of really smart editors at the Times, and a lot of them not only elevated my work, but saved me from myself. I mean, you know, I would have something that was ham-handedly written, or I would have something that needed explanation or something. And they were really good about that. The thing about Kate, my book editor, is that she has more time. I mean, usually the Times editors I was working with, the piece needed to get edited between 5:30 and 7 o'clock. So boom, 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 you know, except for longer discursive series I might be working on. Kate has more time. And when I became an op-ed page columnist, the copy editor, the two copy editors, Steve Pickering, Linda Cohen, have to represent. They were both excellent. And they both said to me at a threshold level, okay, now you're a Times op-ed columnist, you can have as much or as little editing as you want. Being no fool, I said, you guys need to edit me when I need to be edited. When I was a reporter, nobody said you can have as little editing as you want. I mean, sometimes I'd look at my story in the paper on a tight deadline and think, that's not the lead I put on this piece. Kate also has a deal with me, which is if you don't agree, I mean, look, there are people out there who write books who don't take editing at all.
That's terrible.
I know it's a horrible idea.
It's a horror.
But there are times when Kate will suggest something or do something, and I just say, I think she's wrong about that. So I do a lot of what she suggests, but not everything.
Okay. Which do you like better? Do you have a preference for journalism or writing fiction, or? Because you do both really well.
Writing fiction scares me more now, and I mean, it always will, because I'm never writing the same novel twice.
Right.
I mean, pretty much after all this time, I know how to write a column. I should at this point. So
right. That's funny, because I was going to ask you, I think you just answered this question. When you go to your next novel, do you feel like, oh, I learned so much from writing after Annie that I can use in this new novel? Does that ever happen for you, or is it like a totally different thing?
I think I've learned as I've gone along. I mean, somebody was saying to me that they were kind of taken by the fact that the past and the present seemed kind of seamless in After Annie. And that's something, you know, incorporating backstory into front story is really challenging without bringing the reader to a complete stop. And I think that's something that I've learned just from writing novels over the years. So, but each one is, you know, every last one is a completely different book from Still Life with Breadcrumbs. And that's one of the things I like to do, a little bit of a change-up pitch.
Okay. So I always ask this question of every writer I interview, because I'm a totally obsessive person. So what's obsessing you now, Anna, and why?
Right at this very moment?
Or, yeah, how about right at this very moment?
Today, right at this very moment, I am obsessed with the fact that we have hunted down in print and online a young woman who, it turns out, has cancer, who may very well be the Princess of Wales, but also is a wife and a mother of 3 little kids and a human being. And we've been deeply, deeply unkind to her
Yeah.
over the last couple of weeks over whether she photoshopped
I know. Really?
a picture and whether she has an obligation to tell us what was going on. And I hope now that she has told us what's going on, that many of us are thoroughly ashamed of ourselves.
I've seen some people post on Twitter that they are ashamed of themselves, but I'm wondering, don't you think that social media has made people more unkind in
Yes,
general? I
absolutely.
mean,
I think,
it's just terrible.
well, and it's given people the opportunity to amplify the unkindness. So let's say 40 years ago, we had all read this in People magazine,
Right.
and we would have said to our best friends, what's really going on here? How come they're not telling us? But now in a nanosecond, you can go to the
Oh,
comments section and write it down. And that's why none of us should ever read the comments,
right,
because
that's right.
about ourselves, because I think at the end of that event that Zibby put on in New York, where I spoke, I said, I try to be guided always by this quote from Henry James. There are three things in human life that are important. The first is to be kind.
That's
The
right.
second is to be kind. And the third is to be kind. And if we only just stop and say, why are we being unkind? What are we buying for ourselves out of doing it? Uh, I think all things would be better. I hope, I wonder, and I hope if we've learned anything from this episode, because watching that video of her feeling obliged to
Terrible.
tell all of us this
Right.
intimate family situation was really painful.
It is really painful. It is really painful. It's funny because that whole dictum of being kind was actually something, it was like the one gift my mom really gave me when I was little to tell me the most important thing of all, she said, in choosing girlfriends and later when I was choosing boyfriends, is to make sure they're kind. She said, because everything else just will drift away. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, for heaven's sakes, that's stupid. But as I grew up, I realized she's exactly right. You never know what people are going through.
Absolutely.
You never, never know what people are going through.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to show this gorgeous cover again to everybody. Bookshop.org, people, really easy. They'll tell you where your nearest indie bookstore is, or if you have a favorite one, go there, support them. It helps the community. I want to thank you all for being here and all for your wonderful questions. And I really want to thank you, Anna. I will see all of you next week. And Anna, don't go away because I have a story I have to tell you.
Okay.
Okay, see you all later. Thank you, everybody, for being here.